Hello, everyone. I'm Melissa McAllister, and you're listening to The Melissa Made Show. Now, for decades, I've dedicated myself to helping women break the cycle of dieting, navigate through all the fads, and change their lives through my nutrition coaching. Now, each week, I'm going to talk about everything from deep nutrition, mindset, self-care, the ideal workout routine, tips on how and why to implement intermittent fasting in your life, my favorite recipes that are not only crowd pleasers, but they're actually healthy for you, and so much more. Now, with small and consistent changes, you can defy aging while living a happier, healthier, and more heart-filled life. I'm so excited to show you it's possible with the right strategies that are so simple to adopt. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Melissa Made Show. And I am just ecstatic to have the speaker today. So when I decided to do this podcast, there was just a couple of names I could count on one hand of people that I really truly wanted on this podcast because their book moved me tremendously, and Dr. Tarman's did. I'm really excited to dive into the idea of food addiction, which when I first started doing accountability groups on my social media, Dr. Tarman, I was talking about calories, and I was talking about macros and exercise, and I realized, my goodness, this is helping a little bit, but it's not really getting to the root of the problem. And then your book was completely eye-opening for me. So I'm really excited to dive into it, but let me give her a quick formal introduction. Dr. Vera Ingram Tarman is a world-renowned food addiction expert who writes, speaks, and treats people who suffer from sugar addiction, food addiction, and who seek food recovery. Dr. Tarman is the author of Food Junkies, The Truth About Food Addiction, and Food Junkies Recovery from Food Addiction. She also has a great podcast. Dr. Tarman's main goal is to put food addiction on the table of services offered to people suffering from addictions. Food addiction is often dismissed or neglected, leaving many people without the necessary help and compassion they need to get well. As a recovering food addict herself, Dr. Tarman knows that freedom from food addiction is food serenity. Amen to that. Freedom from food addiction tastes great. So thank you so much, and welcome for being here. And I'm going to start this interview with you by actually talking about the elephant in the room, so to speak. Just yesterday, I was perusing my social media, my Instagram, and I ended up on a very attractive personal trainer's Instagram account, and he was talking about sugar and his distaste, so to speak, for when people actually say that food is an addiction, that he doesn't think that we should label food as an addiction. So I would love for you to start to just kind of explain your experience and your, all the education and the treatment that you've given to people about food actually being addictive.
Okay, well, thank you. First of all, Melissa, thank you so much for inviting me on to speak about food addiction. I'm always
welcome
to do this because I'm on a sort of personal and professional campaign to talk about the validity of sugar and food addiction as a viable condition. And yes, just as you said, so that we can be compassionate and understanding. And also, you might be on the best food plan ever, but find that you keep relapsing or slipping back and, eating badly again, gaining weight, whatever it is, and frustrated to no end, like, why does that keep happening? And my message is really that the food plan you might be on, it might be great. And if you just add this little extra piece of understanding, then that will fix the problem often. And so your question about it's kind of a big question. I mean, I have
Yes.
a personal interest in this because of my own background. And, I'm an addictions physician. I work out in Canada. And my professional interest came when I saw people putting down drugs, alcohol, and then they turned to food and would say to me, I don't understand why I'm eating so much when I didn't eat this way before. Or some people said, I used to eat this way before and now I am again, because their drug put it on delay. But let me just backtrack and say food addiction and why it is that people dismiss this idea. I think that more and more in the literature and in the internet and in the just general discussion in the population, there's an understanding that some foods are made by the food industry to be very addictive. You know, it's very hard to just have a few chips and not finish the bag, or want to finish, you know, or you have a couple of cookies and you want the row of cookies in the bag, not just one or two that you might have planned. And that's because the food industry has taken food and potentiated the effect of it so that it's hard to say no. So somebody might say, well, okay, I get that, but how can you take that concept of, you know, they'll say craving induced food, you know, trigger happy food or exciting food. How can you make that a condition that's called food addiction? And that's where I would say it's kind of like for some people, if they have a few drinks, or maybe they're heavy drinkers, they may not be alcoholics, but there's a proportion of the population that it's much sooner that they'll cross the line, and that they can't just have one or two, and it does become an addiction. And when people say, first of all, I'll backtrack even further, how can food be addictive? I have to eat. And probably your trainer that you saw said that, like, come on, you know, we have to eat. And we would say, when we talk about sugar, because that's the universal addictive element, it's not the sugar in fruit, it's not the sugar in veggies. And if we were eating unprocessed food with sugar in it, like fruit and vegetables, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the sugar in the fruit and vegetables that has been extracted out of the fruit and vegetables. Throw away the fruits and vegetables and just take the fructose, or the sugar in the fruit and vegetable, put that now into a drink, which we call pop or soda, put that into a substance, which we call a confectionery, candy, something. That's no longer a food, that's a food product that has a heightened amount of sugar effect. That's a drug that's not any different than tobacco or cocaine or alcohol or anything like that. And that's what we're talking about, is that stuff. So your trainer might say, okay, that's fine. So then call it sugar addiction. You don't have to call it food addiction, or call it processed food addiction, or refined sugar. Like, you know, let's be more specific. And I would say, yes, maybe a more appropriate term would be refined carb addiction or refined sugar addiction. But actually food addiction works too, because if you continue to eat heightened amounts of sugar, eventually more than sugar becomes a trigger. Eventually just flour products become a trigger. Eventually even grain can become a trigger. Like it doesn't stay, just like any addiction, it doesn't stay latent, it continues and grows. We call it a chronic progressive disease. So that for the end stage food addict, even carrots can become addictive, because the act of eating becomes addictive. Like it just morphs into this monster that then we say it's not just refined sugar, and it's actually food addiction. But for the people listening, you might still be at that early stage, and refined sugar is appropriate.
Yeah, for sure. And I always talk about I feel like there's two types of people out there, and I'm sure there's more than two types, but to really simplify it,
Yes.
There's the moderators and the abstainers.
Right on.
And I am one of those people that, if you give me, a little bit of sugar on a regular basis, that need and that want just perpetuates. And when someone says, just have it, I use my husband as an example. He loves ice cream, and he can open up, a pint of ice cream and have a couple of spoonfuls and put it back and be completely fine for a day or two.
Right.
If I have a couple of bites, I'm finishing that pint and I want a pint the next day. And so, I think it's really important for people to kind of, really be honest with themselves. Can I be a moderator, or do I need to be an abstainer? Because for me, I'm completely okay with it, to be like, you know what, I'm just better off with no ice cream than I am just a little bit, because I don't go haywire having that little bit, letting it consume me when it comes to that.
Yeah, and that's exactly that distinction between abstainer and moderator would be the same as saying a heavy user versus an addict. And we can use different terminology. And back to your trainer, This is a physiological, physical difference that's happening in the brain. They're just like what is it that makes an alcoholic and another person not? You know, there's a genetic predisposition and it's all actually about the dopamine receptors and maybe more. This is just being super simple. We're just looking at dopamine. It's probably an overlay of more neurochemicals, but it's a heightened sensitivity to a substance, sugar, where the dopamine surges much bigger, so you get more of a kick than your partner who enjoys it, but they don't get the same kick because your kick is so much, or burst of dopamine is so much that you don't want to put it down, whereas he can. And that's a physiological difference between you and him. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And in all honesty, I have to remind him, because he teases me about it, how I can't keep chocolate in the house. I can't keep ice cream in the house, but his is bread. Like if I were to bake a fresh loaf of bread every single day, the man could not have a couple of bites. He would eat the whole loaf every single day. So everybody has different triggers, but to be aware of the fact that, you know, there's just some things that we just don't do real well with in moderation, and to mainstream that is it being okay. I feel like, you know, with diet culture these days, that they tell you it's bad to eliminate things, when I don't think elimination, even if it just is while you're in the healing process, it is a bad thing.
No, I mean, yes, that kind of argument implies that sugar, therefore, is normal and should be okay. And those of us in the field are saying, no, it's not normal. It's actually a toxin. It's just like, you know, alcohol is literally fermented fruit or fermented grains or fermented carbs of some sort. There's nothing, and if that were to drop onto the ground, like the grapes dropping onto the ground, you know, that's about, and you know, foxes or animals eat those rotting grapes. They get a bit of a buzz of 5%. You know, then there's no problem with that. So I get a little bit of a buzz if I eat a fruit, a nice, pleasant, oh, that was nice, that was delicious. But when you extract that alcohol out of those grapes and then ferment it and distill it, you've got a potent substance. That's no longer grapes. So the sugar, that's no longer, like we're making, I would make the argument that rather than, I agree that we should make the concept of addiction normalized, but also we need to stop normalizing sugar and call it what it is. Like Robert Lustig says, it's a toxin that's causing diabetes and all the rest of that stuff. And the sugar industry is very good at making it normal, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
It's not normal. Yeah, but it is normal if it's in the fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, and that distinction needs to be taught. Yes. Because people will lump sugar into, you know, very healthy foods and also into very unhealthy foods, and kind of expect, you know, sugar, and it's okay when the choice in sugar is what really matters.
Yeah, and you know, we no longer, it used to be in the old days that you didn't want to have a cigarette, and people would say, oh, come on, don't worry about it. I mean, now if you say, I don't want to smoke anymore, people are like, wow, that's no problem. No, you know, because we finally realized that tobacco is actually a toxin. It's not just a benign thing. And we need to do the same thing with sugar, that it's a toxin that needs to have that same kind of response that we have now with tobacco.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amen to that. And I just want to reiterate to my followers, we're talking to an expert here. We're not talking to a fit influencer. We are talking to an expert here. So for those of you guys that are watching the YouTube video, this is the book, Food Junkies. If not, and you're listening to the audio, maybe on your way to work, I want you to know that you can go on my Instagram, and in my highlights, I have a book highlight, and this is in here. And this book was my first taste when I really started realizing that I needed to help people on a deeper level than just being able to cut calories, you know, and to just be able to maybe, you know, add more protein to their diet, and to be carb conscious. I've always been carb conscious. But, you know, when you talk about dopamine and stuff like that, this is a nutritionist Bible when it comes to this. And I know you're trying to make this kind of a thing more available to the mainstream. Can you just share with the audience a little bit more about this book and why you wrote it and what's in it?
Yeah. So the book is an attempt to make credible this concept And also to help explain why it is that if you're eating really good food and then you decide maybe on Saturday, I'm just going to have a little bit of cheesecake because, I've been so good all week. And theoretically, like your husband could do that. But for those of us who can't do that, like, why is it that we then stumble? This book is a way to explain the sort of dynamic, this dopamine dynamic behind why it is that if I have just a little bit of cheesecake, even though I've been good all week and I've got down to the weight that I want, and I have a little bit of cheesecake and now I want the whole damn thing. And if I don't have it, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about, that was really good. And there's still a little bit in the fridge. And, when my partner goes to bed, I'm going to go downstairs and have the rest of it. Like, that kind of crazy thinking is addictive thinking. And the book it tries to explain why that happens. It's a physical response for more sensitive people. And it gives the science behind that. And then it gives actual clinical examples so that you can go, that's me, or that's not me. And then I talk about the recovery. And the recovery is about, you mentioned, I think you said, we have this concept, we're depriving ourselves. It's to say, okay, some of the foods that I eat are triggers. They make me want more. So if you're just wondering, would this fit? Is there any food that you have out there that you have a little and then you just want more? And if that's the case, that's probably a trigger food. If you think to yourself, you're telling me I have to stop, because that's usually the solution. And you think, oh my God, how will I live without my bread? Some people say I'd rather have, I can't live without my bread. That is an addict response, folks. Then I would say, well, clearly it looks like, because you don't want to be focused on needing bread or needing the cigarettes or needing the alcohol to get to sleep or whatever it is. That's a dependency. That's the beginning of addiction that you don't want to have. So it's kind of like to validate why then abstinence of that substance is necessary. And I'm going to cut to the quick here and say, for anybody here thinking, is it even possible to stop, and why would I want to do that? I'd rather live well, and that sense of deprivation will not be forever. It'll only be for a couple of weeks, like any addiction that you stop. If you go through what we call withdrawal, general population calls it deprivation. That deprivation / withdrawal only lasts a week or 2 or 3, and then you're free.
Love that. I love that. That's profound.
And then you won't need that cheesecake. And if you have the cheesecake, it's like scratching an itch. It's back again. It's like, who wants to do that once the itch is gone?
Yeah, I think if you look at, I say growing up in a social media world, I've built my business on social media. And so I've seen the trend of dietitians and nutritionists and doctors and fit influencers and, and you look at some of these, especially these, these really healthy individuals that seem to have this unwavering dedication. And you wonder, how can they do that when you're pulled back here, still trying to not binge on something that you feel you need. Yes. And I do think it is a matter of just allowing that, what you just said of, changing that mindset and that reframing it from being deprivation to just being a time of learning to do without and being okay without actually having that in your diet.
And getting tons of support and recognizing that it is a hard time. Don't be saying, don't write it off. It's a seriously hard time. We actually lock people up. We put them in treatment centers so that they don't pick up their cocaine, their alcohol. And where I work now at a treatment center, we had a food addiction program. Inpatient person went in for a month and they were sitting with their cocaine and the alcoholics beside them. All their issue was sugar. And, they'd be thinking, do I belong here? Absolutely. But by the time they left, they didn't want sugar anymore, but they needed it. And they were actually the most needy patients. They were more needy than the alcoholics who stopped drinking because they had nothing to go back to. The alcoholics just went to sugar.
Right.
The sugar people had nothing. So they were like, with all that emotion that they'd been, stuffing with their food was now raw. And you got to take it seriously. That's why I'm saying, that's why the book is there. This is a serious condition, but it's doable. And the medical profession, unfortunately, it's another reason why I'm on this campaign, for the most part, does not buy into this yet, especially the obesity and diabetic world. And those of us who are more inclined to be suspicious are going to say it's because the food industry funds them or the drug industry funds them. I get no money for this talk, but I would get a lot of money if I said sugar is okay, and here's a pill for your diabetes. So
Yep.
yeah.
That's crazy. So
Yeah.
speaking of the podcast is wonderful. That's the first place, and it's the Food Junkie podcast, right?
Yes.
Yes,
That's
is
right.
a wonderful place to go. But if you can also share, other effective ways to break, patterns and to get that support, that you're speaking of during this process, because I do think, I personally have friends that, hide food and sneak it and stuff because
Yeah.
they don't share, the problem. They're
Right.
shameful.
Yes.
And they don't put themselves out there, but how important that external support is in that process, and where they could find some support for things like this.
Yeah. So I please read the book first, because and if it speaks to you, then continue on with this journey. And it is the beginning of a journey. And this year, 2021, 2022, and the last 2 or 3 years, the world has really opened up in terms of the food addiction world. And the podcast that I do is Food Junkies podcast. I'm doing it with a couple of other people. We've interviewed all sorts of people who are emerging in the field, who are getting this concept. And there are people from keto coaches to food addiction coaches to scientists to writers like Robert Lustig. I mean, we're so just to get familiar with that world, please look into my Food Junkies podcast. And I have a Facebook free page called I'm Sweet Enough, Sugar Free for Life. And that, if you join that, which all you have to do is say that you're not going to promote sugar in the questionnaire. Believe it or not, we get some crazy people who want to join and do that. Then you can actually ask for help there. And we have coaches on there. We have other just people who are wanting to help other people who will make suggestions, because there are now more and more. There's more and more help out there. It's still not across the board. We're trying our best. Like I'm doing podcasts here, like lots of us are speaking to kind of make the awareness of that there is treatment and there is help and that you're not alone. That's so important that you're not alone out there. Like you're not alone and there is services. So
yeah,
I
think that is, it has to be the absolute first step, is because I feel like people feel they're different. And because nobody shares this, openly.
But Alyssa, you know what they're going to find out is that there are more people who share that have this experience than they think.
Yes.
Like we really are
find them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
100%.
But we have a lot of shame about this. Like, you've described the behaviors that are, like are shameful. They're embarrassing to disclose. Like, I ate out of my garbage. Like, that's pretty shameful.
Yeah.
I steal food. Mm-hmm. Pretty shameful. Who's going to want to admit that? But, it happens. You're not alone out there if anybody's had that thought.
Yeah, I plenty of times I've had that. And I do think that it comes down to us feeling that we're weak, and people don't understand that physiological response that actually happens with certain foods. I mean, it sends your brain into a spiral. It's not just that you happen to be weak and you can't turn down a donut. It's which I use donut because that's beautiful. Donuts. That's a great one. The fat and the sugar together. But for people to understand that it's not a matter of weakness. And my personal mission is for women to understand that hormones play a big part in it. Your brain, your environment, your support system. It's not, it can't be as simple as, counting calories and tracking your macros kind of a thing. It has to go way beyond that.
It has to,
but if you do that,
it's hooked to the instinctual survival mechanism. Food is so essential to us. It's hooked to our survival. And so when you potentiate that, make that heightened in the way that foods do to make it a drug, you're dealing with a survival instinct. So for you to say, I'm not strong enough, it's like if I have a gun in your face, you're going to be afraid. And anybody who says they're not going to be afraid is lying. Like it's natural to want to save your life. And this has been targeted, it's hooked to our survival instinct so that we think, and this is the case, you probably know this, when you're on a binge, it's not a pleasant, easy experience. It's usually a lot of heart racing and anxiety, and you know, you're eating quickly, and it's an anxious kind of unpleasant but needy. I need this, I need this, I need this kind of sensation. That's got to do with the survival instinct. And telling yourself to stop that is like saying don't run when there's, you know, an avalanche behind you. Like it's ludicrous.
Yeah, that's a great visual. So would you share with my audience, if you don't mind, maybe, you know, one or two tips to breaking, you know, old habits that you have, and then also how to change that mindset, you know, when it comes to food? It's obviously very hard, but being the expert that you are, just some tips for people on starting this cycle of changing the way that they eat.
Well, I think that the first thing that needs to be done is exactly what you said. You have to change the mindset. So every time you see that message of sugar is love, or sugar is a gift to give to somebody, that it is a advertisement that is meant to serve the food industry, not you. And they don't. A wonderful person, Marion Nestle, wrote that the food industry is not a social service industry. It is a profit industry. It's not interested in your good health. It's interested in profit. So every time you see that, the mindset is, this is a sell, just like cigarettes were a sell and alcohol is a sell, you know, or buy a car and you're going to be sexy. We know that stuff is a sell. This is the same, it's a sell. And that what you're actually ingesting is a toxin. Again, not real food. I'm talking about processed, refined stuff. So that would be the first thing, change the mindset just by seeing it differently. And then let me see here now, I had some, the concept of when you think, oh my God, I have to stop. The next thing is you actually brought this out. That deprivation that you will feel is time limited. It's literally like when you quit caffeine, you get a headache. You know, you're not going to have a headache the rest of your life. It's just until you get over it. Similarly with this, just ride it through, get support, and you will be on the other end with freedom. That's the second thing, just to be aware of that. And in doing that, please get support. Tell people, when I come over, please don't offer me sugar. And if I say I'm quitting sugar, don't laugh and say, well, that's funny. Say, oh, wow, I'll support you. I won't have sugar on the table, or a dessert on the table, right?
Yeah, right.
If you go to a buffet, check ahead of time that they have stuff that's not, because everything has got sugar in it now. Make sure that they don't have sugar in their sauces. If you go to a buffet, you know, you're going to go up there and you're going to see the plates of desserts. Either go with somebody else or order off the menu. Don't order on the buffet where it's all in front of you. Be respectful of your, you know, this concept that this is just willpower. It's not willpower. It's beyond willpower. It's not that. You're not giving enough respect to the addiction. I think that's probably the three big ones. Get a lot of support. And in terms of a practical suggestion, if you're going somewhere, always have a backup, because a backup of something that you can eat or replace. Like when you go, you know, when you go to a restaurant, they often don't have enough vegetables to keep you full. They want to give you a ton of bread or rice or something like that. And that might be too refined in carbs. So have something as a backup just in case.
Love that. And I, you know, one of my platforms is to educate yourself. I think we are bamboozled by the food industry, you know, and what they say is wholesome and you know, real nutrition and healthy, to read books like Food Junkie, and in my highlights, all of those books. I have several books. Dr. Lustig is wonderful at that. I saw that you did it. I don't know if it was you or someone else on your podcast that interviewed Dr. Tim Noakes. I mean, wow. Those are the people. I know you're on Diet Doctor. Those are the kind of the places that you want to go, because knowledge is power. It's so powerful. And the
keto plan, for example, which is like the Diet Doctor, and I don't know if Tim Noakes is specifically keto, but definitely low carb. Those are good plans. It was kind of like their focus was not food addiction, but it just happened to be a food addiction diet, because in order to be low carb or keto, you can't be eating sugar and high refined foods. Like, it's just not possible if you're doing 20 to 50 grams of carbs to eat that stuff, right? But then what happens is that I've noticed infiltrating into these what would be otherwise great plans. The food industry is now infiltrating in with the little keto bars and the keto drinks, and which is all processed stuff, and it's essentially little drugs, which then are going to derail you. So kick them out, and you're going to be fine. And that's really the piece that I was going for earlier. Don't let yourself get derailed. If you recognize this is a trigger food, these keto bars or whatever they are, keto bombs, that's your sign you want to stop that, because otherwise you're going to gain back weight and eat out of control again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, like I said in the beginning, I like to use the word carb conscious. I am low carb. I have been for many, many, many years. And I feel like I'm in so much more control, for lack of a better explanation. I feel so much more in control with when most of my carbohydrates are coming from vegetables and whole food, getting myself some berries and stuff, as opposed to just counting the calories or, trying to get the macros that my personal trainer told me to get, because that's when you allow in all of those processed and refined and ultra processed foods, because you're not thinking of the actual nutritional value of the food.
And and the person might think, okay, well, I get to have, I don't know, 30 carbs or whatever it is that they're going to have. So you might think, so I'm not going to eat anything except a little bit of a bar, which will not make it more than 30 carbs. But that little bit of processed food is enough to ignite that desire to have more, which is the dopamine. And that's something that doesn't happen with your husband, but it happens to somebody with addiction or food addiction. It's a hypersensitive response to refined foods. It's another word for allergy is addiction is a hypersensitive response to a particular food like sugar or refined food. Don't even have a little bit, because it's like sticking your hand in poison ivy. It doesn't matter, a little bit or a lot, you still get the reaction.
Yeah, that's true. And so education to me is really important. And I think one of the reasons that has kept me pretty healthy for most of my life is this just dawned on me, Dr. Tarman, is I'm a huge empath. I mean, people laugh at me because I'm an empath to insects. I'm an empath to a plant. If I see it doesn't have enough water, I'm just ridiculously empathetic. But I also think that bleeds kind of into my own internal care, that I'm empathetic for my heart and my lungs and my brain if I'm eating things that are highly processed, because I know absolutely 100% they're not serving me. And it's as simple as thinking, would you feed this to your baby? Would you feed this to your pet? You would not on a regular basis feed these kind of foods to things that you care about and love. So why are you feeding it to yourself?
Yes, but you know what? We do feed this to our kids, but we call it cereal. We call it
this is true.
But the thing that I say is, would you give your kid a cigarette? Would you give your kid a little bolt of heroin? No, you wouldn't. Well, then let's not do that. Let's not do the same thing like with sugar with our kids. And I know that somebody's going to be saying, come on, that's not the same thing. But I want to tell you something. It's not actually that much different. Sugar, in my view, is slow motion alcohol. We get the same cirrhosis, we get the same diabetes, we get the same fatty liver, we get the same diabetes. I think I said that already. It's just slower. It takes longer. And as a result, we see alcohol and then the effects of alcohol pretty clearly. By the time sugar makes you that sick like it does with alcohol, it's 10, 15, 20 years later. And then we don't see the connection. And all we call it is they died of a heart attack. They died of dementia. They died of diabetes. But really what they died of was the food addiction or sugar addiction that started 20 years ago. It's pretty serious. It's pretty serious.
It's very serious. If you see the rapid growth of autoimmune disorders, and in what a parallel it is to the way that we're eating, I mean, it's just in your face, obvious what's causing our decline. I would love me personally. So I'm going to ask on behalf of my following to close this out. Dr. Tarman, is what does a day in the life look like for you as far as eating goes?
Okay, so I identify myself as an end stage food addict, meaning that, well, maybe not end stage, but late, like pretty serious, because there was a time earlier on, I've been in, I guess you'd call it food recovery for now, maybe about, I haven't had sugar for at least 15 years. And I don't drink alcohol either, because any mood altering, mind altering substance will open the door for food, and I don't want that. So a day in the life of me, and I'm serious. So I'm not saying everybody has to do this. It's just that I was the kind of person who, my whole life was focused around food. How much could I eat? Did I have to run it off? Did I have to exercise like crazy? Did I have to, should I have, like, I had my calculator with me all the time. It was always food, food, food. And life was sort of in the background, but it was always about the food.
Right.
So now what I do is I'm somebody who, I can't just go and say, what am I going to have today? I think the day before, what am I going to have tomorrow? I write it down. I actually myself, I'm not suggesting you have to do this, but I actually weigh and measure the food I have, because I'm going to tell you that if I can have, even I love Brussels sprouts, and I could have 3 plates. I don't need 3 plates. So I want to measure how much I can have, because if I say, Vera, am I hungry or am I full? I'm going to still think I'm hungry even after 2 plates. So I don't even trust myself anymore in that regard. What I trust is that I'm going to do these behaviors. Write it down ahead of time. I weigh and measure. If I go out somewhere, I always check beforehand what I eat. And then I only eat 3 meals a day, nothing in between. I don't snack in between. After dinner, no more food until breakfast. And I'm also beyond that, because we are social animals, including myself. And even though I'm very well versed intellectually in this whole field, I'm still gullible. I'm still maneuverable. And if somebody says, you know what, this is actually okay, why don't you have it? There's still a part of me that's going to think, maybe I can. So I basically keep myself into a social bubble of people who think like I do, to ensure that I stay on the course. Because addiction, that's what you got to do. We talk about having 12-step programs or recovery, relapse. We have all sorts of things that keep us on course, because the default is always to slide back into thinking, I can do this, no problem. A little bit is no problem. I don't know why, but that's our default mode. So I'm very careful with my meals, and I have a lot of support to maintain this. And as a result, no problem.
Yeah. Okay. So that was going to be my last question, but I got one more for you. You can tell me if this is not your area of expertise or anything, but what are your thoughts on, natural and artificial sweeteners outside of sugar?
Okay. So I think that they are they're like they're like methadone. They're a bridge. Because it's so hard to quit sugar, especially if you're new to this whole thing, sweeteners is an okay middle ground. I'll call it that. It's still going to make you crave sweets. Like on the Facebook group, I have people saying, okay, we're not going to eat sugar, but can you give me desserts that are recipes for desserts with sweeteners? And I think to myself, fair enough, they want to quit the sugar. Okay, let's do that. But if you're still wanting the dessert, you're still in that mindset. And wouldn't it be better if you just thought, my meal is good, and I'll have a little bit more of, I don't know, the thing that I have is riced cauliflower. I love riced cauliflower. To me, that is a dessert with a little bit of yogurt on it. It feels like a dessert, but it's not. It's real food. I don't desire the dessert of the kind that I need to replace with a sweetener. So ultimately, you want to get off of the sweetener, but you can use it as a bridge, and it actually works for a lot of people. It might be a trigger, and if you're drinking pop after pop or soda after soda, with sweetener, that's not necessarily good either, but it's still probably better than. It's the middle ground. Yeah.
Yeah. I had interviewed her name is Amy Berger, and
Yeah.
she brought up that point as well, that, she's not one to tell people not to have a diet soda, because if that's keeping you from having the full,
Yeah.
and helping you in that process of going from, having so much sugar in your diet to actually being able to cut it way back or eliminate it, then by
Yeah.
all means, it is that good segue.
Yeah. It's
When
kind
you
of
were
like
talking,
it's kind of like if you quit smoking and you vape instead, or you put the patch on or chew the gum.
yeah,
It,
yeah,
it buys you a bit of time to get off of the other thing, but it's not the place you want to end up, and you don't
yeah.
need to. Yeah.
I love that analogy. That's really good. And to close it off, I just wanted to share with the following, that when I talk to people about, like, say, there's a birthday party that you're going to, or some sort of big party, and you really want to be there because it's full of
Yeah.
people that you love, to prepare yourself by, maybe eating something that's satiating and filling beforehand.
Yes.
I always tell people to put, like, on their phone, to put like a mantra or a quote that helps, keep them centered, to keep themselves busy, like to always have water, or maybe some sparkling water, even a diet soda in your hand
Yeah.
while you're walking around. And then last but not least, I don't care if it's a sister, a best friend. If you tell someone, hey, I need
Yes.
your help, I want you to, figuratively slap the bread out of my hand. If you see me grab for one, that friend will do it for you in a heartbeat. They would love to be your support partner. So ask for that help.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
And or bring your own food. You can either eat ahead of time or bring your own food. And I don't think people really care that much. And if they want you to have something, take it and say thank you, and then put it somewhere. I usually just give it to somebody else who's happy to have it. Whatever. Yeah. Yeah. So you've got a lot of the rules. Or
Yeah, I was going to say, well, I really learned so much from you, which is why I'm so grateful to have you on here. And I know this was incredibly motivating, inspiring, and educating to so many people who feel weak. And I really want to get that mindset out of these women's and men's heads, that they're just weak and they're vulnerable and they don't have the strength that other women have, because it's just not the case.
That's right, absolutely. And let's end on a positive note. Aside from that it's not that they're weak, but also that once you buy this concept that this is an addiction, then the good news is you're given a whole bag of tools, like things that you've just suggested, and you will get over that hump, and then you're going to be free. You're going to be free, and that's such a delightful feeling. I don't wake up and think, oh my God, what the whole thing of what am I going to do? It's like, I'm going to enjoy my fruit in the morning. I have 8 ounces of berries and a little bit of yogurt, and that's my breakfast, and that's good. I'm happy with that. And that's what you'll have is enjoyment of the food that you have without obsession. Like, you can't get better than that. Plus, one more thing, your weight will stay stable. Go up and down and up and down.
No, I mean, it's called food freedom, and you look fantastic. So your proof is in the pudding, shall we say, that, you really gain control of that, which you will. And I do, for me, when I was able, which I'm sure I learned from you, when I was able to realize that I'm a happy abstainer. I mean, don't feel sorry for me because I turned down the bite of cake. I'm just, it's beautiful. You did a great job on it. I'm going to take your word for it. It tastes great, but I really don't want that bite.
You don't want that bite. Exactly.
Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Tarman, for spending this time with me and my followers. I really do appreciate what you're doing and what you're putting out there. And you do it in such a kind way that it's very easy to soak in and to feel like you're not alone. So thank you so much for this. And you guys, you can find her all over the place, right? You're on your podcast. Are you on social media anywhere that they could find you?
Yes. So basically check the Facebook group out. And yes, I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on, Twitter to some degree. Still trying to figure out Instagram, but I'm around. Vera Tarman.
Okay. Yeah. So find her on Facebook, and I'm going to actually go join that group myself. So I will see you guys in there. Thank you, Dr. Tarman, so much. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and maybe one day we can have you on again.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow, we've reached the end. But before I leave you, I'd love to hear from you. After all, it's not every day that someone reaches out and asks for your opinion. And to me, your opinion does matter. So please share this episode with anyone that you think needs to hear this message. And remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. My name is Melissa McAllister. And until next time, thank you for being your own health advocate.